Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be working on a simple project. The customer contacted us and wanted these to be welded solid. As you can see, some of these come apart real easily, and that's no fun, especially when you have to transport all of these around to different events. So what we're going to do is we're going to weld them all solid. We're also going to repair some of the ones where the welds have snapped, because a lot of these times these type of things are made in production facilities. They don't really inspect the welds that great. So a lot of times they will fail as soon as you buy the product. So we're going to reinforce the welds, make sure they don't fall apart, and give a nice clean product right back to the customer. All right. So as far as gear goes, I'm just gonna be wearing some real simple gear. This is gonna be an easy repair project, and I'm one of the type of guys that I don't like putting on a bunch of stuff unless I have to. So I've got my handy TIG sleeves right here. They're made by Weldmonger. His name is Jody, real great guy. Welding tips and trick, give him a follow. So we'll just slide these on real quick. I like these a lot because they basically prevent me from having to put on an entire jacket. I can just slide these sleeves up, and then my entire arm is protected from all sparks, spatter, any and everything like that. All right. Once I got my sleeves on, I'm all protected on my arms. I want to make sure my hands are protected. So I've got some TIG gloves here as well. And these will protect me from all possible burns, spatter, things like that. Put those on. Sometimes with this sleeve, they kind of create friction. It's a little hard to get gloves on. So just give me a second. And then of course, we got our welding helmet, okay? Now for this project, we're not gonna use a flat disc or a ceramic grinding wheel. We really don't wanna take out a lot of material. We really just wanna remove the paint. So in order to do that efficiently, we've got these wire wheels, okay? These wire wheels have a bunch of little wires that spin really, really fast. And when these wires spin really fast, they do a really good job of stripping away all the paint that's on these pieces, okay? Now with most grinding wheels, I only hand tighten them. You really don't need to crank down on them. There's really no reason to. You're not making them any safer by making this the tightest connection in the world, okay? Now, grinder. PPE. I got my piece. I'm gonna go ahead and get my machine set up, and then we're gonna get started. All right, now we're here at our Miller-Matic 220 AC/DC welding machine. We're gonna go ahead and get this set. Now the lovely thing about this machine is that it has a nice digital readout that provides all your settings for you by this function called Auto Set. So just for today's sake, I'm just gonna go ahead and use that. So we're gonna scroll down to TIG. As you can see, this is a multi-process machine. It'll do different types of welding. I'm gonna be using argon gas. Okay. And our material is real thin today. We're using maybe 18 gauge, maybe a little bit over, so we don't wanna use a whole lot of heat, so we're only gonna be using 45 amps. That way we don't blow any holes in the material. Now that our machine's set, we're ready to get started welding. All right, now that our machine's set, we're now ready to move on to the next step, okay? So just to give you a little bit of background of the function or process that we're using, it is TIG. That stands for tungsten inert gas, okay? The way this works is we have a tungsten piece, tungsten electrode, sitting in the center of that cup. Whenever I press on this foot pedal down here, it's gonna initiate electricity or energy through our line, through our tungsten. And then when I make contact with the metal, it's gonna create an arc, almost like you see lightning, but in a controlled form. And it's gonna create a molten metal puddle. And I'm able to use that molten metal puddle to melt two pieces of steel together. Almost like you see right there on that weld, okay? Now again, those welds were no good. They're snapping, they're breaking. So we're gonna go ahead and reinforce those, make them look good. Now, before we do that though, we've got to clean off the paint off of all of our pieces. And that's the best practice for no matter what you do. You always wanna clean up the material that you're using, okay? A cleaner material is gonna allow for a better weld. So I've got my wire wheel loaded up, ready to go. I'm gonna snap a battery on here. Shout out to Milwaukee. I'm all Milwaukee all the way through. You see I like red. And once I get this battery on, we're gonna take this grinding wheel, spin it up, and take away all the paint on each piece. That way we can weld them up real nice and clean. All right, we've got my battery now. And as you know, power tools, electric power tools don't work unless you slap the battery in like a magazine. So we've got it loaded now. Ready to go, okay? Now, generally, if I'm gonna be just cleaning paint off of pieces, I'm not gonna put on a full face shield. A lot of people will contest that, say you always need a full face shield when using power tools like this. The safest way is always going to be a full face shield, but you gotta remember safety is your responsibility, so you make the choices that you want to and the protection that you feel like you might need for the product, okay? So let me just go ahead and get some safety glasses on. I do wanna make sure my eyes are safe. As soon as I get those on, we'll get started. All right, guys, so we got my safety glasses on now. We're now ready to work safely. So, since we're ready to go, I'm not gonna make you sit through 5 or 6 minutes of just watching me grind these pieces down. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on a quick time lapse. Once we get done grinding these pieces on, I'll show you the next step. Okay, now we have all of our grinding done and we're ready to move on to the next step. But before we do that, I just wanted to show you something really quickly, okay? Let's take a closer look at this. See that kind of lighter gray next to the darker gray in that weld right there? That's epoxy, okay? So what that means is it left the factory glued together instead of welding it together. So for whatever reason, the weld didn't pass inspection. So instead of re-welding it, they just put epoxy on it and then painted right over the steel. The customer had several of these that are breaking, and that is the reason why. They were never really welded together that great, okay? So for future reference, if you ever need anything strong and you want it to last for a really long time, always bring it to your local fabricator. Don't buy it cheap, don't buy it from Amazon or eBay, because a lot of times, again, the weld quality is off and you're just gonna have to pay for them to be repaired later instead of having something sturdy from the get-go. Alrighty, now we're ready to start the welding process, okay? Again, we're gonna be using TIG, which stands for tungsten inert gas. The way it works is I'll line my tungsten up with the piece. As soon as I get it lined up where I want to, I'm gonna ease into the foot pedal. As I continue to press on the foot pedal, it's gonna add more electricity. And the more electricity we have, or the more amps we have, the more heat we'll have, okay? So we're gonna bring it to the right temperature, create the puddle, and I'm gonna weld it all the way around and have it real nice and clean and strong, okay? We finally got all of our welding done. Every single piece is now welded out. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a flat disc and I'm just gonna shape up the welds just a little bit to have a nice, smooth, even appearance all the way around. That way when it's painted up, it looks real nice and pretty. We've now completed every weld on each one of these pieces. We also took a grinder and made sure we grounded those welds down flush and smooth. That way everything looks nice and uniform. And now we're ready to ship them out back to the customer. Just to give you a quick overview of how this project went, we had a customer email us not too long ago wondering if they can get some of these repaired. We went over to the shop, picked them up. Once I got them in the shop, I then evaluated what it needed to happen with this piece. I saw that it was thin gauge metal, so I went ahead and used TIG. I could have used MIG, it probably would have been just as quick, but with thin gauge metal, I like to have all the control with the heat as much as possible, and TIG and the foot pedal gives me that type of control. So I went ahead and welded them all out, nice and clean, And then anything that gets painted, I always like to take a grinder and sand the welds smooth and flush. They're already pretty smooth with TIG, but I like things to look uniform, especially with paint. Now that it's all sanded and smooth, even while sanding, I was able to get a little inspection of each weld. So I pretty much completed my inspection process, and that's the biggest thing about fabricating, is always making sure that you inspect each weld. By going through with the grinder, grinding everything nice and flush, I'm able to look at each piece and make sure I didn't miss anything. I'm also able to make sure that nothing's too defective to the point where it can void the weld, okay? So, project is all complete. Thanks for tuning in, guys.